I am Julian, and I am 24 years old. About 6 months ago, I took off my graduation cap in the middle of a crowded, echoing convention center lobby, shoved it forcefully into my own mother's hands, and walked out on my entire family forever. While I was standing on stage being honored as the absolute top graduate of my university class, my parents were sitting in the audience, wearing custom-made t-shirts with my twin brother's face printed on them, completely ignoring my existence. They literally looked down at their cell phones while my name was called. They laughed and cheered for him, and they gave me a totally empty, silent row. But there is a massive detail they did not know at the time. They had no idea I had already uncovered the sickening truth about a stolen inheritance, a forged signature, and a massive financial cover-up that was about to rip our family tree right out of the soil. And right now, the very same people who treated me like a shadow are the ones leaving desperate voicemails, begging for forgiveness, and trying desperately to avoid a devastating lawsuit. Before I tell you exactly how all of this went down, hit that like button if you believe that blood does not give anyone the right to abuse you. And please, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. It helps to know I am not speaking into a void. Now, let us go back to where this storm actually started. The air in the convention center lobby was thick with the smell of cheap perfume, nervous sweat, and the overwhelming, deafening noise of 3,000 people celebrating the biggest day of their young lives. Families were taking photos, hugging, and crying those happy tears you always see in movies but never actually get to experience yourself. I stood in the middle of that swirling chaos, the heavy, cheap fabric of my black graduation gown pulling uncomfortably at my shoulders. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed, casting a harsh glare over the sea of people. I looked across the lobby and spotted the people who were supposed to be my family. My mother, Sylvia, was frantically trying to coordinate a massive group photo near a large indoor water fountain. She was barking orders, waving her arms, and arranging people by height like a crazed wedding planner. She wore her expensive pearl necklace, the one she only brought out to impress other suburban mothers. My father, Richard, was standing off to the side, laughing loudly with my uncle Gregory, slapping him on the back. And my twin brother, Cameron, was standing dead center in the middle of it all, soaking up the attention like a sponge, wearing a smirk that I had grown to absolutely despise over the last 2 decades. But it was not just their presence that made my stomach turn into knots. It was what they were wearing. They were a sea of matching navy blue t-shirts. 24 people. My parents, my grandparents, my aunts, my uncles, and my cousins. 24 customized shirts that read "Proud Family of Cameron Class of 2026" in bold, obnoxious gold lettering. Right below the text was a massive, high-resolution print of Cameron's senior portrait. Not a single syllable of my name was printed on that fabric. Not a single person in that entire group of 24 adults had bothered to ask where I was standing, how my ceremony went, or if I wanted to be in the photos. I took a deep breath. My heart was not racing. My hands were not shaking. For the first time in my life, the crushing weight of their rejection did not make me want to shrink into the floor. It made me feel incredibly sharp. I walked right up to my mother. I did not rush. I took my time, letting the fabric of my gown swish around my legs. I watched as my Aunt Beatrice pointed a professional camera at the group, yelling at everyone to squeeze in tighter. They were literally forming a physical wall against me. She finally noticed me approaching. Her eyes darted to my face, and her expression instantly shifted into one of mild annoyance, like a busy waitress dealing with a customer who sent a dish back to the kitchen. "Julian, where are you going?" she snapped, checking her gold wristwatch. "We have a dinner reservation for Cameron at the steakhouse in an hour. Go stand by your brother. We need to get this picture done before the photographer leaves." I did not yell. I did not scream. I did not cry. I just reached up, grabbed the edge of my graduation cap, pulled it off my head, and pressed it firmly against her chest. She stumbled back a half step, her hands instinctively coming up to catch the stiff cardboard square. She looked down at the cap, then back up at me, genuine confusion spreading across her perfectly manicured face. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice dropping an octave. "You can give this to Cameron too. I said, my voice steady and cold. Add it to the collection. Because clearly, this day is only about him. My father stepped in immediately. He used that deep, authoritative voice he always used to shut down neighborhood HOA meetings or intimidate cashiers at the grocery store. He stepped into my personal space, trying to tower over me. He smelled like expensive scotch and peppermint. Son, you are making a scene, Richard warned, his jaw clenching. Stop acting like a jealous child. Pick up your hat, get to the car, and we will discuss your attitude after dinner. I looked him dead in the eye. I did not blink. I am not making a scene, Richard. I am just leaving. And I am never coming back to sit at your table again. I turned my back on them. I walked through the heavy double-glass doors of the convention center and stepped out into the blinding, oppressive Oklahoma sunlight. The heat hit me instantly, but it felt good. Felt like freedom. I walked across the massive asphalt parking lot toward my beat-up Honda Civic. With every single step I took away from that building, it felt like peeling off a heavy, suffocating layer of skin that I had been wearing for 24 years. I kept my ears open. I waited for the sound of footsteps behind me. I waited for a voice calling my name. I waited for someone, anyone, to say those magic words. Wait, Julian, we are sorry. But all I heard was the distant roar of the highway traffic and the crunch of gravel under my own shoes. Nobody followed me out. To understand why a day that was supposed to be a celebration turned into the day I severed ties with my entire bloodline, you have to understand the 24 years of quiet, steady disrespect that led up to that exact moment. You have to understand what it is like to be the ghost in your own home, watching someone else live the life you were supposed to share. Growing up in our suburban, 4-bedroom house just outside of Tulsa, things looked perfectly normal from the street. We had the manicured green lawn, the 2 cars parked neatly in the driveway, the big Thanksgiving dinners where the extended family would pile into our living room to watch football and eat dry turkey. From the outside, the Weber family looked like a television commercial for the American dream. But inside those walls, there was a clear, brutal hierarchy, and it was established the very moment Cameron and I took our first breaths in the hospital. We are fraternal twins, but we might as well have been born on different planets to completely different species. Cameron was the sun, and my parents were the planets helplessly orbiting him. I was just empty space. My mother, Sylvia, treated Cameron like he was a delicate, precious investment. Every single thing he did was magnified and celebrated. If Cameron got a minor scrape on his knee from riding his bike, the entire world stopped. Bandages, ice cream, hours of coddling. If I had a fever of 102, my mother would leave a cheap bottle of store-brand medicine on my nightstand and tell me to sleep it off so I would not get my brother sick. I remember a specific winter when we were 12 years old. A nasty strain of the flu was going around our middle school, and we both caught it on the same day. We shared a bedroom at the time. My mother literally moved a canvas camping cot into our room, but she placed it exclusively on Cameron's side. She slept on that uncomfortable cot for 3 straight nights, waking up every 2 hours to feed him warm soup, place cold washcloths on his forehead, and read him comic books. I was 10 feet away, across the room, shivering so hard my teeth rattled, sweating completely through my bedsheets. I asked her for water once, and she told me to go to the bathroom sink and get it myself because she could not leave Cameron's side. I learned very early that my pain was an inconvenience, and his pain was an absolute emergency. My father, Richard, was no different. He viewed Cameron as a direct extension of his own ego. Cameron played sports. Cameron was loud. Cameron took up space and demanded attention. My father loved that because it mirrored his own aggressive personality. I was quiet. I liked numbers. I liked organizing things and reading thick books about history and economics. My father looked at me like I was a defective product he could not figure out how to return to the manufacturer. This dynamic was not just a childhood thing. It did not fade as we grew into teenagers. As we got older, Cameron actively weaponized their favoritism. He learned that he could use my parents' blind love as an impenetrable shield. If he broke a window playing baseball in the yard, he blamed me, and they believed him without a trial. If we went to the mall for back-to-school shopping, Cameron got the expensive, name-brand athletic shoes that cost $200, and I got whatever was on the clearance rack at a discount store. I started working at a local grocery store the moment I turned 16 just so I could buy my own clothes. Cameron never worked a day in his life. He was too busy with football practice, they said. And the absolute worst part is that for a very long time I accepted it. I thought this was just how families worked. I thought I just needed to work harder, be quieter, 'cause fewer problems, and eventually, one day, they would look at me and love me the same way they loved him. Then came our senior year of college. We both attended the same state university. He studied sports management, spending his time at frat parties and skipping lectures. I majored in accounting, burying myself in the library and taking on grueling internships. We were going to graduate on the exact same day in the spring. I foolishly believed this would be the great equalizer. One stage, two sons, identical degrees. I thought finally they will have to celebrate both of us equally. The math demanded it. I was so incredibly wrong. About 3 months before graduation, my phone buzzed on my nightstand. It was a notification that I had been added to a massive new family group chat. My mother had created it. I opened the messaging app and looked at the title of the chat. It was named Cameron's Big Day. I scrolled through the initial flood of messages. She was coordinating restaurant reservations at the most expensive steakhouse in the city. She was planning a massive backyard party and hiring a catering company. And then came the message that felt like a physical, heavy punch directly to my gut. She sent a digital mock-up of a t-shirt design. It had Cameron's smug senior portrait on the back, and the front read, "Proud family of Cameron Weber, class of 2026. She sent a poll to the chat asking for everyone's shirt sizes. She ordered 24 of them. Aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents. Every single person in my family requested a shirt to celebrate my brother. I sat on the edge of my cheap apartment bed and stared at the glowing screen for over an hour. My heart pounded in my ears. I watched the little chat bubbles pop up as my relatives praised the design. Not a single person in that chat, not even my father, typed the words, "What about Julian?" It was as if I simply did not exist. I was going to walk across that same stage, having earned a much harder degree, and my own family was going to be sitting in the crowd wearing another man's face on their chests. A few weeks later, the situation escalated from emotionally hurtful to financially suspicious. I was sitting in the driveway of my parents' house on a Sunday afternoon, waiting to help my dad move some heavy boxes out of the garage. I heard the low, aggressive rumble of an expensive engine echoing down the suburban street. Cameron pulled up, but he did not pull up in his beat-up, 10-year-old sedan. He pulled up in a brand-new, metallic gray Porsche Macan. The engine purred like a luxury yacht as he parked it halfway onto the grass, completely disregarding the lawn my father usually obsessed over. I walked over to the car, genuinely confused. We were college students. We worked part-time jobs for minimum wage. I asked him whose car he was driving. Cameron grinned, stepped out of the leather interior, tossed the heavy key fob in the air, and caught it. He leaned against the shiny door and told me it was his early graduation present. He said Mom and Dad had dipped into the college fund to help him put down a massive down payment and secure the financing, since his own credit score was basically non-existent. I felt the blood drain completely from my face, leaving my skin cold and clammy. The college fund. When we were 18 years old, my grandfather passed away. His funeral was a massive affair, but what happened a week after the funeral was the defining moment of my financial life. We were called into the living room and told that my grandfather had left a trust fund. A substantial inheritance meant to be split evenly between Cameron and me to completely cover our college tuition so we would not start our lives in debt. At the time, my father handled all the paperwork. He was the adult, the businessman. He told me my share of the money was legally locked into an educational account and would be paid directly to the university's billing department every semester. I trusted him. I was a kid who just lost his grandfather. I signed several thick stacks of legal papers he put in front of me on the kitchen table and never thought about it again. But here is the massive problem. I did not use that money. Over the past 4 years, I busted my back to earn massive academic scholarships. I worked 30 hours a week at a local accounting firm entering data just to pay for my rent, my groceries, and my textbooks. My tuition was fully covered by merit grants and my own relentless sweat. So, if I had not touched a single penny of my half of the inheritance, where did my money go? How did my parents suddenly have tens of thousands of dollars in liquid cash to drop on a luxury vehicle for Cameron? I stood in the driveway looking at that shiny gray Porsche, and for the first time in my entire life, I stopped looking at my family through the eyes of a hopeful, desperate son wanting love. I started looking at them through the eyes of a forensic accountant. And what I saw staring back at me was a massive ledger full of lies, missing funds, and criminal deceit. The tension inside me began to build like a heavy iron pressure cooker with no release valve. I drove back to my apartment, completely ignoring the boxes I was supposed to help my father move. I locked my door, opened my laptop, and I started digging into my old financial files. I pulled up my bank statements. I requested my entire financial aid history from the university portal. Everything confirmed my deepest, darkest suspicions. My tuition balance had been zeroed out by scholarships every single semester. The inheritance money was gone, vanished into thin air. I stared at the digital numbers on my screen. This was not a mistake. This was a calculated, deliberate theft. A week after the Porsche incident, I had to drive back to my parents' house to drop off some mail that had been sent to my apartment by mistake. As I turned my Honda onto their perfectly paved, suburban street, I saw it. Hanging across the front porch railing, secured with thick black zip ties, was a massive, 6-foot-wide vinyl banner. It was professionally printed in full, vibrant color. It read, "Congratulations, Cameron, future sports agent. We are so proud of you." I parked my car at the curb and just stared through the dirty windshield. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. I gathered the mail, walked up the concrete driveway, and pushed open the front door. The house smelled like roasting meat and expensive floral arrangements. My mother was standing in the kitchen island, surrounded by blue and gold centerpieces for the upcoming graduation party. She was humming a cheerful tune to herself, arranging ribbons around glass vases. I tossed the stack of mail onto the granite counter. It made a loud smack. She jumped slightly. I pointed toward the front window, where the back of the banner was blocking the sunlight, and asked her very calmly if she was planning to put up a banner for me as well, or if she had simply forgotten that I was also graduating with a highly difficult degree in less than 10 days. She did not even stop arranging the fake flowers. She waved her hand dismissively, not making eye contact. "Oh, Julian, please stop being so dramatic. You know Cameron is the first person in our family to get a sports management degree. It is very special. You are just doing accounting. It is basically just math." She then finally looked up at me, gave a hollow, tight-lipped smile and said, "Don't worry, Julian. We will make sure you get in the background of some of the photos when the professional photographer gets here." The background. That was my designated place in this family. A literal prop to make their lives look complete for social media. I left the house without saying another word. The drive back to campus was a blur of righteous anger. I drove straight to the business building, parked illegally in a loading zone, and walked directly into the office of my academic advisor, Dr. Harrison. Dr. Harrison was a no-nonsense, brilliant man in his late 50s who had spent 20 years in high-level corporate finance before deciding to teach. He was the one who had guided me through my grueling internships. He was the one who taught me how to negotiate a starting salary, how to spot bad real estate investments, and how to protect my professional future. He had been more of a father figure to me in 4 short years than Richard had been in 24. I sat down heavily in his office chair, and I finally broke my silence. I told him everything. I told him about the matching shirts, the insulting banner on the porch, the shiny new Porsche, and the missing inheritance money that my father supposedly locked in an educational account. I expected him to offer me pity. I expected a sad look. Instead, Dr. Harrison leaned back in his heavy leather chair, steepled his fingers, looked me dead in the eye, and gave me a piece of advice that permanently changed the trajectory of my life. "Julian," he said, his voice deadly serious, "people who steal do not stop stealing until someone audits them and holds a legal fire to their feet. You need to stop acting like a wounded victim, and you need to start acting like the brilliant accountant you are." He was right. I had a secret weapon that my family knew absolutely nothing about. Because they never bothered to ask a single question about my grades, my classes, or my life, they did not know that I had maintained a flawless 3.94 GPA while taking maximum credit hours. They did not know that I had already scored in the top 1% on my preliminary CPA exams. And they had absolutely no idea that the faculty committee had secretly selected me as the sole recipient of the Dawson Award. The Dawson Award was the highest academic honor bestowed by the university's College of Business. It was not just a piece of paper. It came with a massive cash grant, guaranteed placement at top-tier firms, and a highly publicized presentation during the graduation ceremony in front of thousands of people. I had actually tried to tell them once, months ago. I tried to bring up my GPA at a tense family Thanksgiving dinner. I had barely gotten the words, "I made the dean's list again," out of my mouth before my mother immediately interrupted me, loudly asking the table if they had heard that Cameron made the intramural softball finals. I never brought my accomplishments up to them ever again. The morning of graduation finally arrived. I drove to my parents' house because we were supposed to ride to the convention center together. The house smelled like heavy hairspray and cheap cologne. My father was standing in the hallway, aggressively adjusting his silk tie in the mirror. He looked at me, completely ignoring the fact that I was holding my graduation cap and gown, and told me to go upstairs and calm my brother down. "Your brother is nervous about the speech the sports department asked him to give," Richard ordered. "It is your job as his brother to support him today. Go tell him he is going to be great." I walked slowly up the carpeted stairs. I found Cameron pacing his bedroom, wearing a tailored suit, holding a stack of index cards. He looked at me, wiped sweat from his forehead, and actually had the nerve to say, "Hey man, don't wander off too far today. Mom wants you to hold my jacket and my phone while I do the speech so they don't bulge in my pockets." I looked at my twin brother, the golden boy, the guy who drove a Porsche bought with stolen money, asking me to be his coat rack on the day I was graduating at the top of my class. I smiled. It was a cold, tight, terrifying smile. I told him I would be exactly where I needed to be. I turned and walked out of the room. I knew a massive storm was coming, and I was holding the lightning in my bare hands. The convention center was an absolute cavern of noise and movement, holding over 3,000 graduates, faculty members, and their families. Because we were in entirely different colleges, Cameron and I were directed to sit in completely different sections of the arena floor. I sat with the business majors in the front left quadrant. I was surrounded by people who respected me, people who had pulled all-nighters with me in the library, people who knew how hard I worked. My roommate Marcus was sitting 2 rows behind me, giving me a solid thumbs up. My girlfriend, Clara, was sitting up in the bleachers directly behind the faculty section. She was holding a small bouquet of yellow flowers just for me, her eyes locked onto mine with fierce pride. The ceremony began with the usual pomp and circumstance. Boring administrative speeches, the playing of the national anthem, the introduction of the Board of Trustees. About an hour in, it was time for the student speeches. The sports management department went early. Cameron's name was called by the announcer. He walked up to the podium, adjusting the microphone with that practiced, arrogant smirk he used to charm his way out of trouble. He delivered a highly generic, cliché 3-minute speech about teamwork, overcoming adversity, and chasing dreams on the field of life. It was shallow, but he delivered it with charisma. When he finished and said, "Thank you, class of 2026, the reaction from section 104 in the stands was explosive. My entire family, all 24 of them, stood up in unison, like a perfectly choreographed military drill. They unzipped their jackets and threw them off, revealing the 24 matching navy blue t-shirts with Cameron's massive face printed on them. They screamed, they whistled, they stomped their feet against the metal bleachers. My father was pumping his fist in the air, his face red with exertion. My mother was crying theatrical tears and blowing kisses toward the stage. It was a completely obnoxious, coordinated spectacle. Other families around them were staring, whispering, and clearly annoyed by the disruption, but my family did not care. They were putting on a show for their golden child, cementing his status as the only person in the room who mattered. Then, the agonizingly slow procession of handing out degrees began. The College of Business went first. We lined up alphabetically in the aisles, inching our way toward the massive stage. My heart was completely steady. When I reached the top of the stairs, I handed my phonetic name card to the announcer. I stepped out onto the stage. The spotlights were blinding hot. I looked out into the cavernous room, scanning the thousands of faces, searching for section 104. The announcer leaned heavily into the microphone. Julian Allen Weber. He mispronounced my last name, adding a hard, awkward syllable at the end that did not belong there. I looked directly at my family's section as I walked across the stage to receive my diploma cover. My mother was looking down into her lap, frantically scrolling on her cell phone, probably uploading a video of Cameron's speech. My father had his back completely turned to the stage, engaged in a deep conversation with Uncle Gregory. Cameron was leaning over a row of seats, taking a group selfie with his frat brothers. Not a single person in those 24 matching shirts was looking at the stage. The space they occupied in the arena was loud, rowdy, and crowded, but to me, looking down from that stage, it was a completely empty row. I took my diploma cover from the department head. I did not wave to the crowd. I did not smile for the professional camera flashing in my face. I walked off the opposite side of the stage with a spine made of absolute steel. The utter silence and blatant disrespect from my family was deafening, but miraculously, it did not break me. Crystallized everything. The deep resentment, the childhood hurt, the endless years of trying desperately to be seen and validated. All of it evaporated into the cold air conditioning of the arena. I felt a strange, chilling calmness settle over my entire body. They had made their choice. Now I was going to make mine. I returned to my folding chair on the floor. I looked back at Clara. She caught my eye from across the massive room and gave me a proud, firm nod. She knew exactly what was about to happen. She was the only one in the entire building who did. The announcer finally finished reading the names for the business degrees. The crowd settled down, a dull murmur rolling through the arena as people shifted in their seats, waiting for the College of Education to begin. But the ceremony did not move on. The announcer stepped back. Instead, Dean Alastair, the formidable head of the business college, stepped up to the main podium. He tapped the microphone twice, adjusted his reading glasses, and looked out over the sea of black gowns. Before we continue with the conferring of degrees, the dean's deep voice echoed powerfully through the massive speakers, cutting instantly through the chatter. We have one final, highly prestigious presentation to make for the College of Business. Each year, we rigorously select one single student out of thousands who exemplifies extraordinary academic rigor, professional excellence, and unyielding dedication to their craft. I sat perfectly still in my chair, staring straight ahead at the podium. I could feel the energy in the room shift. People were paying attention now. I casually glanced up toward section 104. I saw my father finally turn around, crossing his arms, looking slightly annoyed by the administrative delay. My mother looked up from her phone, sighing heavily. They had absolutely no idea. They thought they were just waiting for this boring academic part to end so they could go back to the parking lot and celebrate Cameron. The dean took a deep breath, reading from a heavy plaque. This student has maintained a near-perfect GPA, completely self-funded his education, and completed 2 grueling corporate internships with top accounting firms in the city. It is my profound honor, the dean continued, his voice rising, to present this year's Dawson Award, along with a $10,000 academic grant, to a young man who represents the absolute best of this university. Please direct your attention to the stage 4. I tightened my grip on the cheap plastic armrests of my folding chair until my knuckles turned completely white. the agonizingly quiet period before the storm was officially over. The hurricane was about to make landfall, and it was going to wipe the Weber family off the map. Julian Allen Weber. Summa cum laude. The voice of Dean Alastair boomed through the massive convention center. The sound system was incredible, designed for rock concerts and political rallies, and it carried my name to the very back rows of the upper deck. He did not mispronounce my name. He did not add a strange, awkward syllable to the end of it like the previous announcer had done during the standard roll call. He said my full legal name with absolute crystal clarity. He said it with the heavy, undeniable respect of a man announcing the absolute top tier of his academic institution. The air in the room felt entirely different the moment he spoke those words. The ambient chatter of 3,000 bored families instantly died down. People were paying attention. I sat perfectly still for a fraction of a second. I smoothed down the front of my black graduation gown, feeling the cheap, scratchy synthetic fabric under my fingertips. I did not rush. I took a deep, steadying breath, feeling the cool, overly conditioned air fill my lungs, smelling the faint scent of floor wax and thousands of nervous, sweating college students. I stood up slowly from my cheap plastic folding chair in the business college section. I walked toward the center aisle, and the moment my foot hit the thick red carpeted runner, the entire business college section absolutely erupted. These were my peers. These were the people who actually knew me. These were the exhausted students who had suffered through advanced corporate tax law seminars with me, the ones who had seen me sitting in the university library at 3 in the morning fueled by cheap black coffee and sheer desperation. They started clapping, whistling, and stomping their heavy shoes against the hard concrete floor. The sound was deafening. It was not polite golf tournament applause. It was a roaring, genuine, thunderous celebration. My roommate Marcus was standing on his folding chair, completely ignoring the angry, urgent gestures from the event ushers in their yellow vests. He was screaming my name at the top of his lungs, waving his graduation cap in the air like a madman. I looked past him, scanning the bleachers directly behind the faculty section. Clara, my amazing girlfriend, was standing up. She had both hands pressed firmly over her mouth. Even from 100 feet away, under the harsh glare of the arena spotlights, I could see the heavy tears streaming down her beautiful face. She knew what this meant. She knew what I had survived to get here. But as I walked up the short, temporary wooden stairs to the main stage, my heart pounding a steady rhythmic drumbeat against my ribs, I was not looking at Clara or Marcus anymore. I turned my head, squinting against the stage lights, and I looked directly at Section 104. The 24 people wearing matching navy blue t-shirts with my twin brother's face printed on them were absolutely paralyzed. The loud, obnoxious, arrogant cheering section that had just demanded a standing ovation for a highly generic 3-minute speech about teamwork was completely and utterly silent. My mother's cell phone slowly lowered from her face. Her mouth was physically hanging open. Her expensive pearl necklace rested against her collarbone as she stared at the stage in pure, unadulterated shock. My father, Richard, had stopped mid-sentence in whatever loud, boisterous joke he was telling Uncle Gregory. His face went completely pale, all the arrogant, sun-baked color draining out of his cheeks in a matter of seconds. His eyes were darting wildly from the podium to me, trying desperately to process the reality that the son he treated like a defective piece of furniture was walking onto the main stage to accept the university's most prestigious academic honor. Cameron was staring at me. His jaw was clenched so tight I thought his teeth might shatter. His arrogant, practiced smirk was entirely gone. He looked incredibly small in that moment. The 24 shirts celebrating him suddenly looked ridiculous, like cheap, poorly designed costumes from a very sad, very pathetic community theater play. They were caught, in front of thousands of people. Their blatant, undeniable favoritism was laid bare for the entire arena to witness. There was nowhere for them to hide their shame. I walked across the wide stage. The spotlights were blinding, making me squint, but I kept my eyes locked on Dean Alastair. He extended his hand, and I shook it firmly. He handed me the heavy, polished mahogany plaque with my name engraved in gold, and a thick ivory envelope containing the $10,000 academic grant. He leaned in close to the microphone, ensuring the entire building heard him. "Julian," the dean said, his voice carrying an immense, authoritative weight that silenced the remaining whispers in the crowd. "Your work in forensic accounting and your flawless execution during your corporate internships have set an entirely new standard for this university. You have demonstrated incredible resilience and an absolutely unmatched work ethic. You have an incredible career ahead of you, and we are profoundly honored to call you one of our own." I thanked him, my voice steady and surprisingly calm. I turned to face the massive crowd of thousands of people. I held the Dawson Award against my chest, feeling the solid, heavy would anchor me to reality. I did not wave to my family. I did not smile for the professional photographer snapping pictures rapidly from the media pit below the stage. I just stood there for a long moment, letting the thunderous applause wash over me, knowing deep in my bones that I had earned every single second of it without a single drop of support from the people sharing my bloodline. I walked off the opposite side of the stage, gripping the heavy wooden plaque, and returned to my seat. The rest of the ceremony was a complete, chaotic blur of administrative announcements, the synchronized turning of tassels, and the joyous tossing of caps into the air. When the final marching band song played and the massive crowd began to file out into the lobby, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I did not go to the designated family meeting point by the south exit, where the Webbers always congregated for their forced, fake family photos. I walked straight to the main lobby fountain, the exact spot I knew my mother would try to stage her massive family photo shoot because of the natural lighting. Clara and Marcus found me first in the crushing crowd. Clara threw her arms around my neck, nearly knocking my graduation cap off, and held me so incredibly tight. She smelled like vanilla and fresh air. Marcus slapped my shoulder hard, laughing in pure, unadulterated disbelief, telling me it was the greatest, most satisfying thing he had ever witnessed in a public building. And then, like a dark, suffocating storm cloud rolling through a sunny day, my family found us. My mother pushed aggressively through the crowd of celebrating families, using her elbows to clear a path. Her face was a frantic, terrifying mixture of deep embarrassment and forced, rigid control. My father was right behind her, his face flushed red with simmering anger. Cameron trailed behind them, looking incredibly uncomfortable, refusing to make eye contact with me. Uncle Gregory and Aunt Beatrice followed closely, looking completely lost and confused. "Julian, where do you think you are going?" my mother snapped, completely ignoring Clara and Marcus as if they were invisible ghosts. "We have a dinner reservation at the steakhouse in exactly 1 hour. Go stand by your brother right now. We need to get this group picture done before the photographer leaves." She was acting like the last 20 minutes had not even happened. She was trying to force reality back into the comfortable little box where Cameron was the undisputed star and I was just the extra, the background character meant to fill out the edges of the frame. She wanted to pretend the public humiliation she just experienced was a shared family victory. I did not yell. I did not raise my voice. I just reached up, grabbed the stiff edge of my graduation cap, pulled it off my head, and pressed it firmly against her chest. She stumbled back a half step, her manicured hands instinctively coming up to catch the black cardboard square. She looked down at the cap, then back up at me, genuine, deep confusion spreading across her face. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice dropping an octave, a hint of genuine panic bleeding through her manicured facade. "You can give this to Cameron too," I said, my voice steady, cold, and loud enough for the surrounding families to hear. "Add it to the collection. Because clearly, this day is only about him. I am just the guy who happened to graduate on the exact same day." Richard stepped into my personal space, puffing out his chest, trying to use his physical size to intimidate me. He used that deep, authoritative voice he used to bully local contractors and intimidate teenage cashiers at the grocery store. "Son, you are making a massive scene. Stop acting like a jealous, petulant child. Pick up your hat, get to the car, and we will discuss your terrible attitude after dinner." I looked my father dead in the eye. I did not flinch. I did not back down. I am not making a scene, Richard. I am just leaving. Did you know I graduated summa cum laude? Did you know I got the Dawson Award? The highest honor in the entire college. He hesitated, shifting his weight awkwardly in his expensive leather shoes. He looked at Uncle Gregory, then back at me. I knew you were doing well in your classes. I assumed you were handling things. No, you didn't, I said, cutting him off with surgical precision. Because nobody asked. Not once in 4 years. Not a single question about my internships, my grades, my interviews, or my future. I am not going to sit at a steakhouse with 24 people wearing my brother's face on their chests and pretend today was about both of us. It was never about both of us. It was always about your golden boy. You have your picture perfectly framed. You do not need me in the background anymore. I turned my back on him. I looked at Clara and Marcus. I told them we were going to lunch. I walked through the heavy double glass doors of the convention center and stepped out into the blinding Oklahoma sunlight. I kept my ears open, listening to the gravel crunch under my shoes, waiting for someone, anyone in that family to call my name, to chase after me and apologize. Nobody did. And honestly, it was the best thing they could have ever done for me, because it proved I was entirely right. But the emotional break was just the beginning. The real war was about to start, and they had absolutely no idea I held the legal launch codes. We drove to a small barbecue joint near the edge of campus. It was a local place with sticky wooden tables, loud country music playing from a corner jukebox, and rolls of cheap paper towels sitting on the tables instead of napkins. I ordered a massive plate of smoked brisket, macaroni and cheese, and baked beans. I ate it with the kind of ravenous, bottomless appetite you only get when you finally stop carrying a massive, suffocating boulder on your back. Clara held my hand tightly under the table. We did not talk about my parents or the sickening display in the lobby. We talked about the future. We talked about our careers, about the massive starting salary I was going to negotiate at my new corporate accounting firm, and about finding a real estate agent to look at renting a much better apartment in the city center. Life felt incredibly normal, and for the very first time it was entirely mine. By 2 o'clock that afternoon, my cell phone started exploding in my pocket. The notifications came rolling in like heavy mortar fire. First from my mother, then Richard, then Uncle Gregory, and then Aunt Beatrice. Every single message was a variation of the exact same toxic, narcissistic theme. They said I ruined Cameron's special day. They said I was deeply ungrateful and profoundly selfish. They accused me of embarrassing the family in public by walking away from the photo shoot. My mother sent a massive paragraph about how she spent weeks planning the expensive backyard party and how I was spitting on her efforts. Not a single text said, "We are so sorry we ignored you." Not a single message acknowledged the Dawson Award or the years of grueling hard work it represented. It was just a complete, overwhelming avalanche of blame, guilt-tripping, and aggressive projection. I silenced my phone and put it face down on the sticky wooden table. But later that night, sitting in the quiet safety of my apartment, one final text came through. It was from my cousin Elias. Elias was older, quiet, and usually stayed far away from the chaotic family drama. His text read, "Hey man, I just want you to know I looked up the Dawson Award while we were sitting at the restaurant. That is a seriously massive deal. I am incredibly proud of you, and I am so sorry about the shirts today. It was completely messed up, and I should have spoken up instead of just wearing it. Congratulations on everything you have built for yourself." One person out of 24 had taken the time to actually Google my accomplishment. That ratio told me everything I needed to know about my permanent standing in the Weber family. It was all the closure I needed. The next morning, I woke up with absolute, chilling clarity. The emotional ties were officially severed, which meant I could now handle the business side of things without a single ounce of guilt or hesitation. I opened my laptop, poured myself a black coffee, and pulled up the contact information for the small law firm in Bartlesville that had handled my grandfather's estate and his funeral arrangements 6 years ago. I dialed the number and asked to speak directly with the trust administrator. A woman named Penelope took my call. She sounded bored and cautious at first, giving me standard corporate non-committal answers. But once I verified my identity, provided my social security number, and proved definitively that I was one of the two named beneficiaries of the trust, her tone changed entirely. It became sharp, professional, and slightly defensive. I asked her a very simple, direct question. I asked her for the complete disbursement records of my exact half of the inheritance, the college fund that was legally supposed to secure my educational future. She put me on a brief hold. The terrible elevator music played in my ear for 5 agonizing minutes. When she came back on the line, her voice was tight. She told me the trust had been disbursed in full exactly 2 weeks after my 18th birthday. A cashier's check for $48,000 had been issued directly to Richard Weber, acting as my custodial parent, accompanied by a signed authorization form releasing the funds from the educational lock. I felt the room spin slightly, the walls of my apartment pressing in on me. I asked her to email me a digital copy of that authorization form immediately. 10 minutes later, the PDF file arrived in my inbox. I opened the file. My hands were perfectly steady as I zoomed in on the signature line at the absolute bottom of the page. It was supposed to be my signature. It was supposed to be my consent to release my future. But it was not. It was a loose, hurried, sloppy scrawl that looked absolutely nothing like my handwriting. Someone had forged my name on a federal legal document to release $48,000 directly into Richard's personal bank account. My own father committed a felony to steal my college fund. I did not call my parents to scream at them. I did not throw things against the wall. I picked up my phone and called a man named Nathaniel. Nathaniel was a high-powered, utterly ruthless attorney I had met during one of my grueling corporate accounting internships. He specialized in civil litigation, complex financial fraud, and bitter estate disputes. He was brilliant, terrifying in a courtroom, and extremely expensive, but I had the $10,000 cash grant from the Dawson Award sitting safely in my checking account, ready to deploy. I sat in Nathaniel's downtown office the very next morning. The room smelled like expensive leather, polished oak, and fresh espresso. I laid everything out on his massive mahogany desk. The forged trust documents, the email from Penelope, my university billing statements proving every single dime of my tuition was paid by my own merit scholarships, and the high-resolution photos of Cameron's brand-new, luxury Porsche parked on my parents' lawn. Nathaniel looked at the documents for about 15 minutes in total, heavy silence. He traced the forged signature with the tip of his silver pen, comparing it to my actual signature on the retainer agreement. Then, he looked up at me, took off his reading glasses, and gave a sharp, predatory smile that sent a shiver down my spine. "Julian," Nathaniel said, his voice calm, precise, and lethal. "Your father did not just make a poor parental financial decision. He committed forgery, wire fraud, and the direct misappropriation of a minor's trust. This is textbook embezzlement. If this goes to a criminal trial, he is facing serious prison time. We are going to absolutely bury him under so much legal paperwork, he won't be able to breathe." He explained my options clearly. We could go straight to the police, but that would drag out for years in the backlogged criminal court system. Or, we could file a massive civil lawsuit for the stolen funds, plus extreme punitive damages, and use the highly credible threat of a criminal referral to the district attorney as massive leverage to force an immediate, painful settlement. I told him I wanted my money, I wanted it fast, and I wanted them to sweat blood. But I knew Richard wouldn't surrender easily. He was too deeply arrogant, too used to controlling the narrative at his neighborhood HOA meetings and family dinners. I had no idea just how desperate they were about to become when they realized they could not bully their way out of this. We spent the next week building the absolute perfect legal weapon. Nathaniel hired an independent, highly respected forensic handwriting expert from a neighboring state. The expert meticulously compared the forged signature on the trust release document to 20 different verified samples of my actual handwriting from high school standardized tests, tax forms, and driver's license applications. The expert's official, notarized report was definitive and deeply damning. The signature was a complete, amateur forgery, executed by a much older hand, displaying distinct tremors consistent with my father's handwriting. Once we had the forensic report locked in and sealed, Nathaniel drafted a formal demand letter. It was an absolute masterpiece of legal destruction. It outlined the exact timeline of the theft, cited the specific criminal statutes Richard had blatantly violated, and demanded the immediate restitution of $55,000, the original stolen amount plus all accrued interest over the last 4 years. It stated clearly that if the funds were not deposited into Nathaniel's secure escrow account within exactly 14 days, we would immediately file the lawsuit in county court and hand the forensic forgery evidence directly to the police department for criminal prosecution. I gave Nathaniel the green light. He sent the massive envelope to their suburban house via certified, signature-required mail. The explosion happened exactly 2 days later. I was sitting in my apartment, reviewing complex spreadsheets for my upcoming CPA exam, when my phone started ringing aggressively. The caller ID flashed Richard's name. I let it go straight to voicemail. He called back 3 more times in rapid, frantic succession. Then came a text from my mother. It just said, "Call us right now. What have you done to this family? You are destroying us." I did not respond. I pulled up the voicemail app, pressed play, and listened to my father's message. "Julian, it's your father." Richard's voice came through the small speaker. He was trying desperately to use his old authoritative, booming tone, but there was a distinct, terrified tremor underneath it. His breathing was heavy. "I just received a very disturbing, highly inappropriate letter from some lawyer in the city. I do not know what kind of sick game you think you are playing, but you are completely out of line. This is a private family matter. We do not involve outsiders, we do not threaten lawsuits, and we certainly do not talk about criminal charges over a simple misunderstanding. Call me back immediately so we can handle this quietly like adults before you do permanent damage." A family matter. He forged my signature, stole my future, lied to my face for 4 years, and he had the sheer, staggering audacity to call it a family matter. I forwarded the voicemail directly to Nathaniel. He told me to maintain absolute, strict radio silence. Let them panic. Let the crushing reality of a felony charge sink deep into their bones. The next evening, there was a loud, aggressive pounding on my apartment door. The door literally rattled in its frame. I looked through the peephole. It was Cameron. He was still wearing his cheap work polo, looking completely unhinged, sweaty, and frantic. I opened the door, but I kept my foot firmly planted behind the heavy wood so he could not push his way inside. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Cameron yelled, his face flushed red with panic, his eyes wide. "Mom has been crying for 2 days straight in the kitchen. She hasn't slept. Dad is pacing holes in the living room floor. You are threatening to send our own father to prison over some stupid financial misunderstanding." "It is not a misunderstanding, Cameron," I said, my voice eerily calm and low, cutting through his hysteria. "It is fraud. He stole my inheritance. He forged my signature on a legal document." Cameron ran a trembling hand through his hair, looking frantically down the empty apartment hallway. "Look, I know about the money, okay? Dad told me. He said he had to use it because the family was struggling with the mortgage bills, and he needed to secure my car financing so I could get to my new job and look successful. He was going to pay you back eventually. We were all going to pay you back." I stared at him, feeling a cold, infinite void open in my chest. He knew. My twin brother, the golden child who spent his entire life taking absolutely everything, knew that he was driving a luxury Porsche paid for with my stolen inheritance. And he never said a single word. He let me eat cheap ramen noodles and work 30 grueling hours a week while he played frat boy and drove a car that literally belonged to my future. "You knew?" I whispered, the very final thread of sibling loyalty snapping entirely, turning into dust. "You knew he stole my money for your car, and you still stood there at graduation in those ridiculous shirts and let them treat me like garbage. He is our dad," Cameron pleaded, tears of deep self-pity welling in his eyes. "Drop the lawsuit. We will figure out a payment plan. Don't do this to us. Don't ruin my life over this." "Tell Richard he has exactly 12 days left," I said, and I slammed the door directly in his face, locking the heavy brass deadbolt. The flying monkeys came next. My Aunt Beatrice called me the next morning. Beatrice was the family peacemaker, the one who always talked about forgiveness, church values, and keeping up appearances in the neighborhood. She tried to deeply manipulate me, crying heavily on the phone, telling me that I was destroying the family over petty money and that I needed to be the bigger person to honor my grandfather's loving memory. I asked her point blank if she would be the bigger person if someone forged her name and stole her entire retirement fund. She sputtered, failed to formulate an answer, and hung up on me in a huff. On day 10 of the 14-day deadline, Richard's hired attorney, a man named Montgomery, contacted Nathaniel. Montgomery tried to play hardball. He was an old-school lawyer who thought he could bully a young accountant. He claimed the funds were legally used for household educational expenses and threatened to countersue for emotional distress and defamation of character. Nathaniel did not even blink. He calmly emailed Montgomery the independent forensic handwriting report proving the felony forgery, along with a completed, signed draft of the criminal complaint addressed directly to the district attorney. Nathaniel gave them exactly 1 hour to accept the original financial demand, or the settlement offer was off the table entirely, and the police would be called. 45 minutes later, Montgomery called back. They surrendered completely, but winning the money was nothing compared to watching their perfect, manicured suburban facade completely collapse into ruins. The settlement was absolutely brutal for them. Richard and Sylvia had to entirely drain their retirement 401k accounts, taking massive tax penalties in the process, and they had to take out a massive, high-interest second mortgage on their suburban house just to come up with the liquid cash to avoid prison. Exactly 3 days after the final deadline, $55,000 was wired securely into my bank account. The sheer, devastating humiliation of Richard having to sit in a bank manager's office and confess why he needed an emergency loan. The total destruction of his perfect, untouchable suburban image. It was honestly more satisfying than the money itself. They were fundamentally broken, exposed for exactly who they were. It has been exactly 4 months since that money hit my account. My life has changed in ways I never thought possible. With the settlement money and my Dawson Award grant, I paid off the very small amount of student debt I had accumulated, and I put down a substantial deposit on a beautiful modern townhouse in a quiet, upscale neighborhood. Clara moved in with me last month. We spend our weekends cooking together, exploring the city, and building a life that is completely free of screaming, drama, and toxic, exhausting competition. I sat for the rigorous CPA exam and passed on my very first try, ranking in the top percentiles in the state. The corporate accounting firm I interned with offered me a full-time position with a massive starting salary, incredible health benefits, and a clear, fast-tracked path to a senior promotion within 3 years. When I walk into that office every morning, people respect me. They listen to my financial strategies. I am no longer a shadow. I am no longer a background prop waiting to be noticed by parents who never cared. I am the main character of my own life. As for the Weber family, I am entirely, permanently no contact. I changed my phone number, blocked their emails, and made sure the strict security desk at my office complex knows exactly who is not allowed in the building under any circumstances. I heard through the grapevine, mostly from Elias, who is the only relative I still occasionally speak to, that things have completely fallen apart back in Tulsa. Richard is working brutal 60-hour weeks just to pay off the massive second mortgage, and the intense financial stress is supposedly tearing his marriage apart. The threat of a messy, expensive divorce, fighting over custody of their remaining assets, is constantly hanging over their heads. Cameron could not keep up with the exorbitant insurance and maintenance costs on the Porsche without Richard's constant financial support, and the luxury car was legally repossessed 2 months ago in the middle of the night. The Golden Boy is currently working a miserable mid-level retail sales job and taking the city bus to work every morning. Sometimes, I sit in my quiet, peaceful living room, holding Clara's hand, looking at the framed Dawson Award hanging proudly on my wall, and I think about that graduation day. I think about the empty row, the mispronounced name, and the 24 matching t-shirts that tried to erase my existence. For 24 years, I let those toxic people dictate my worth. I let them systematically convince me that I was less than, that I did not deserve a seat at the table. But taking off that graduation cap, handing it back to my mother, and walking out of those glass doors was the defining moment of my existence. It was the exact moment I realized that you absolutely do not have to accept the role toxic people assign to you. You do not have to sit quietly in the background of their photos. You can stand up, speak the unvarnished truth, and build your own stage. Blood means absolutely nothing if it is not paired with respect, honesty, and basic human decency. I am Julian Weber. I am a top-tier accountant. I fought fiercely for my own justice. I protected my own future, and I won. And I will never, ever let anyone make me feel small again. Let's pause for a moment. Thank you for staying with me this far. You're truly amazing. Please help me by liking the video and commenting the number 1 below so I know you've been here with me until this point. This not only helps more people discover this story, but also lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone out there. Your support is the greatest motivation for me to keep sharing the rest of this incredible journey. Have you ever faced something similar with your own family? Have you ever had to walk away to save yourself? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next journey.